Well, thank you, choir, so very, very, very much. And before I get into the meat of the word here this morning, I'm reminded about our Wednesday night dinner, and the menu for Wednesday night is meatloaf. So Wednesday night it's meatloaf, and this morning it's the meat of God's Word. So this has happened to me on more than one occasion. When I have been visiting one of our members who is aging, elderly, either homebound or in a nursing home, and I'd be visiting with them, and they would say something like, "You know, Pastor, I used to be so active in the life of the church. I used to come to worship every Sunday, maybe sang in the choir, maybe was involved in United Methodist Women or participated in a Sunday school class. I used to love to come and help out at the rummage sale, things like that. And I just can't do that anymore. And I find that the only thing I can really do to help the church anymore, here in this nursing home or here in this assisted living center or here in my own home, is just to pray for people. And sometimes God just lays people on my mind. I hear about them through the church newsletter. I hear about them because someone's called and told me, or the prayer chain sometimes will still make a call. And so all I can really do is just pray for people. And when I hear that, I'm always taken back a little bit, and I want to say, that's all you can do? My goodness. What a marvelous gift to the life of the church. What a marvelous gift to lift up for others that you who now have some time, you're not as busy as maybe you once were with activities and running about or responsibilities or whatever, but that you could give of your time and your mental thought just to lift up one another, just to lift up others in the spirit of prayer, because what they are really talking about is the ministry of intercession, the ministry of praying for others. And what I say to them is, I wish I had more like you, not more necessarily that life has brought them to a point necessarily of physical infirmity, but life and maybe their own decisions have brought them a point of slowing down just a little bit, where they can really just think about others and the needs of others and to lift them up through the ministry of prayer. In our passage today, we have a story. It said, when Jesus had finished saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum, and he said, there a centurion servant whom his master valued highly was sick and about to die. And as the story goes on, we hear the story of this centurion and his servant, and the servant who had needs, and how this centurion sought out Jesus and was lifting up the needs of this one whom he loved unto Christ, and entering into really a spirit of intercessory prayer, of intervening, of getting involved, of seeking Jesus' face, of seeking Jesus' healing, of lifting up and asking for Jesus' power to be involved in the life of this one whom he loved, and interceding on his behalf. The examples in the Bible of intercessors are many. We think of Abraham interceding for Lot and praying for the people there, that the righteous in the midst of that community that was about to be destroyed would be saved. We see Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane praying for his disciples that they would be kept and that they would be one, even though he knew persecution and affliction and heartache was going to come their way and things that were hard for them to understand. Paul constantly in his letters, either to individuals or to churches, talks about how daily I bear the burden of your concerns and my anxiety for all of you as I lift each of you up faithfully in my prayers. Paul, we think of as a teacher and a preacher, but Paul was also a man of prayer who prayed regularly for those whom he saw as under his spiritual care, and prayed regularly for those who were on his heart and had special needs, and he was an intercessor on behalf of the church and those whom he saw as his children in the Lord. And when we look at this story, we see that one of Jesus' great invitations to us, and over this season of Epiphany and Lent, we've looked at many of the invitations of Jesus, but I believe one of the things Jesus is really encouraging of his followers, really invites us as his disciples to do, is to enter into a life of intercessory prayer, to really be engaged, to engage ourselves effectively in the ministry of prayer for one another. And when I look at this passage, I see four main keys or four main ideas to what it means to developing a life or a lifestyle of intercessory prayer. First of all, it just begins with what I would call identifying those whom we highly value and those whom have needs. They kind of go together. Look at the story. It says there's a centurion whose servant whom his master valued highly was sick and about to die. That's so interesting. It was a servant whom he valued highly, and he knew that he was sick. And I think it's helpful just to pause there just for a second and to reflect in our own life. Who are the people whom we value highly? And specifically those whom we value highly, who we know have some special need. Wow. When we stop and think about that, we begin thinking of friends and family and loved ones and co-workers and others, maybe neighbors and childhood friends and others who come into our midst, and we look at these people and we think, you know, if I really think about it, these are people whom I treasure. These are people who are on my heart. These are people who have my attention because I value them highly. They are dear to me. And sometimes when we identify these people, it's not just that they are dear to us or we value them highly, but they are facing some difficult situation. I just think of Christy and me and our own circle of family and friends here recently. Our son would be one whom we value highly, and he has some challenges and some situations with his job in El Reno right now. And from time to time, he doesn't go into a lot of details. Some of that he can't share. But we know there are stresses and pressures which come from leading a nonprofit organization, and we value him highly, and we value the work he does highly, and so we enter into prayer for him, sometimes as a family, and sometimes in our own personal prayer time. And we think of our daughter Beth, and so glad she's here doing well. Some of you didn't know she has over the last couple of weeks faced some fairly significant major dental work, some kind of dental surgery, and that is not always easy to endure. One was a 4-hour session. You know how hard it is to sit and keep your mouth open for 4 hours while the dentist is working on you and to deal with a certain amount of discomfort and things like that. And she is one whom we valued highly. So there was a physical need. There was a kind of a traumatic experience she was going to have to face. And we value her highly, and we were praying that God would show her a way of healing, through some of these dental works. Christy and I have some friends, very close friends, who are having a significant family upset because of some decisions of one of their children, because of the daughter, and it's created ripples through the family. And sometimes they come and they call and they just visit and they say, this is so stressful for us, and we're trying to find a path of God's love and healing in this family situation to preserve unity in the family, but it's tough at times. And so we have valued these people all of these years. They have been our friends for over 30-some years and have been so faithful to us. And of course, this is a time when we want to be faithful to them, and so we lift them up in our prayers. Sometimes texts come in on our prayer chain. In fact, Kay came in this morning and said, Alan, did you get the message about Randy Brashear? And those of you who have been in the church for a little while all know Randy and his wife, and both of them are having some health troubles. But Randy especially, just the other day, went for some chemo and then developed some heart problems and is going to have some attention to that. And so these are people who are our church family. These are people whom we value. Last week in church, I think it was Kay again, lifted up Kitty Goodpasture and facing some surgery. And we look around and sometimes we don't always admit it right off, but these are our brothers and sisters in Christ. This is our church family. and we hear these stories of things that are going on with their health or their circumstances or things that are coming upon them. And these are people whom we value highly, and they have a need. And the invitation for us is to be there for them. To be there for them and as prayer partners for them, to be there for them, lifting them up and letting them know that as they have been so faithful to us at different times in our journey, we are going to be so faithful to them. And a second clue I see to this, and I know some may not understand this, you've got to kind of have some permission to this, but it's not only our identification of others as valued people in our own sphere of relationships who have needs, but it's a willingness, when appropriate, to get others involved as well, to kind of put together what I would call a prayer team. And that is always a powerful thing when we understand it's not just an individual who's praying for us, but we're getting others involved in helping with this situation as well. We're motivating others and assembling others as a part of an encouragement team or a support team. Listen to this. It says, There a centurion servant whom his master valued highly was sick. And he sent some of the elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal this servant. It wasn't just that the centurion himself took individual action, and there were reasons he got others involved, but he solicited others to get involved. He solicited others to come to Jesus as well. And it says they came to Jesus in verse 4, and they pleaded earnestly with him. So when it's appropriate, sometimes people are kind of private about their personal needs and what's going on, and you have to be sensitive to that. But sometimes they are encouraged by the fact, I'm praying for you, and my prayer team at church is praying for you as well. And it's interesting, there have been times when I've gone to the hospital, there's been an injury, someone's had a surgery, someone's been diagnosed with cancer, some critical illness, or there's been a recovery for surgery, and I'll talk to people. Sometimes they're people I don't even know very well, but I'll ask them, we have a prayer team at our church, would you like me to go back and put you on the prayer team? And sometimes I'll get a response like this, that would be wonderful because my sister, her church also has a prayer team and their prayer team's praying for me. And I have a friend and they go to the Assembly of God and their prayer ladies are praying for me. And all of a sudden you start seeing it's not just an individual who's praying, but it's a network of prayer that's surrounding these people. It's a community of prayer that's lifting these people up, and to give them the assurance that I'm praying for you and others are praying for you. We're asking others to take your needs to Jesus and to plead earnestly on your behalf unto Him. We're soliciting support and prayer support. You know, there's sometimes when people have financial needs, someone sets up a thing, I think it's called a GoFundMe account, and people can participate financially in the needs of others. Well, this is a Go Pray For Me account that we can set up. We can set up a Go Pray For Me page, a Go Pray For Me Facebook page, or whatever it might be, just in our own network of lifting people up and bringing them to a point of prayer. I never forget, and I've shared this story before, but I love this. This is in the words of Captain Sullenberger. He was the airplane pilot back, when was that, 2009, when his U.S. Airways flight 1549 took off from the airport in New York, and not only got up but into the air, but immediately had engine problems, both engines out, and he realized he could not make it back to the airport. He could not make it back to the runway. He ended up landing that plane with 139 passengers in the Hudson River. I know you remember that story. There were dramatic scenes of that all over the internet and TV, etc. And I remember in an interview, someone asked Captain Sullenberger, when you realized you were really in trouble and you had to land that plane, did you take a moment for prayer? And he said, no. He said, to be honest, I didn't, because I really didn't have time. But he said, I was very convinced that there were 139 people praying for me. You know, that airplane in an instant became a community of prayer. That airplane, in just an instant, there was a prayer community praying for Captain Sullenberger to land that plane, and my, how their prayers were answered as he brought that plane down safely and successfully in the midst of the Hudson River. What a wonderful thing. When all of a sudden we realize I am surrounded by a community of prayer. What a tremendous comfort when we can come to the point of realizing people whom we value and love, who are facing trials in their life, that my loved ones, my valued ones, are surrounded by a community of prayer. What a tremendous, comforting thought. And then it goes on, and it says, when they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him. They poured out their heart to God. They were crying out to God. They were sharing their heart to God. They were making their requests known to God. I mean, how many different ways can we say this? They were making their prayers earnestly known to God. Christy has a phrase, and I've not always appreciated it until I read this passage, but she will sometimes talk about those who are on her prayer list and for whom she is praying. And she says, I've just been pleading with God. And that's I never knew the power of that until I saw this text this week and was thinking about that, how the same phrase is used, just pouring out our prayers earnestly to God. And I'll have to admit, sometimes I'll visit with people, I'll go to see people, and their circumstances are just so overwhelming. They're just so shocking. They just seem so tremendous and so overwhelming. And Paul talks about this, coming to points in our life and we don't even know the words to pray. You know, people are expecting me as the pastor to pray for them, and I know you've had the same experience, and I want to pray for them. And I'm thinking, what would be the right words? How would I even lift up this prayer to God? And Paul talks about experiencing these points where we come to the point where we don't even know how to pray, but the Spirit knows how to pray for us. And sometimes the Spirit just has to take over and lead our thoughts and our words in these prayers. And we have to trust that even though we're stumbling and kind of mumbling and we're not saying it in an eloquent way or maybe using the right words, God knows our heart. God knows what's on our heart. He knows the depths of our heart. He knows that we are longing for this person's wholeness. We are longing for His intervention in this person's illness or this person's circumstances, and we are pleading earnestly. We're just like children crying out to a parent that God will get involved and in some way touch and bring His power and His love to this situation. And then finally, in our prayers for others, there comes a point where we have to trust in Christ's sovereignty, trust in His authority and power, and know that He is going to bring about ultimately what is best for this one whom we love. In fact, it says that the centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal this servant. And they came to Jesus. They pleaded earnestly with him, this man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue. So Jesus went there with them. And it goes on and it says, he was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to him to say to him, Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I know I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you, but say the word and my servant will be healed. That's his way of saying, I trust that if you even say a word, you can change this circumstance. I know that you can. You have the power to do it. For he says, I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one to come, and he comes. And I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. And when Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him, and turning to the crowd following him, he said, I tell you, I have not found such great faith like this, even in Israel. Then the men whom he had sent returned to the house and found the servant well. We don't know what the outcome is going to be, but we can trust that God has the power to take care of this person and this situation, and we know that God will do it in a loving way. I remember when Christy's brother was so sick with pancreatic cancer, and it looked like he was coming to the end of his life, and Christy's mother had been pouring out her heart and pleading to God for Bruce's healing. But I remember talking to her mother one day, and she said, ultimately, I know that God will take care of Bruce. God is going to take care of Bruce, and wherever this journey leads, I know that Bruce is in his hand. Yes, we pray for what we understand to be the best for our loved one, but ultimately it's a matter of trust that God will take care of the situation. It's not just a person whom we highly value and love, but even more than we can imagine, these are people whom God highly values and loves. Wow, that's a powerful thought. These are people whom God highly values and loves, and we can trust in His power, in His authority, and for His best will to be done in the lives of those we love. I'll be honest, there are times when I've gone to the hospital and people are so sick and so on the door of entering the kingdom, and I've left the hospital, and in my own mind I'm thinking, what am I going to say at their service? I'm already writing their funeral service in my mind, and sometimes my prayer has shifted to, Lord, just give them a gentle and wonderful entrance into your kingdom. Be with them in these final hours, and bless them in their journey into your kingdom. And then I'm called the next day, and I'm said, they're better. I'm going, what? They're awake and talking, and they want you to come see. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wasn't praying exactly what God had in mind, but that's okay. God knows what He's doing, and sometimes I'm thinking, I just need to pray this person home, and God's thinking, wait a minute, I'm not through with them yet. I've got another healing miracle, and sometimes it's the other. Sometimes I'm praying, Lord, touch them, heal them, restore them, help them be back in the life of the church, and I get the call, and God's taking them home. It's God knows what He's doing, and that's part of the trust. But we can be there in the journey of lifting people up and praying for them and interceding for them. Lent is a time for introspection. It's a time to look at ourselves. It's a time to examine ourselves. And I know that's all a part of our Lenten journey. But Lent is also a time to look around us, to take stock of those people whom we value highly, whom we love, who are dear to us, people in our own church family and family who have needs. It's a time to make our list, to keep it fresh, to pour out our hearts to God, and to trust Him, and to join hands with Christ and accept His invitation to walk with Him in this important ministry of intercessory prayer. Thanks be to God. Amen.